sometimes you never really know how you'll react until it happens. I've read that everyone seems to have the answers, but they're always on opposite sides. I grew up in a broken home. My mom and dad argued all the time. One day, my dad walked out on us. I was 12 at the time. Over time, I came to understand that my parents were no longer together. I had an older brother and sister, but they had left home. My brother was 24 and my sister was 22. They were both in college at the time. They are now married and live in other states. I might only see them during a holiday or if they visit while on vacation. They are not very close to my mother since she remarried. I was born when my parents were hoping to save their marriage. It went well for a while, but they started bickering and arguing again. I think the final straw was when my dad found out my mom had cheated on him. She said it was because this went on for years until my mom finally said that I might not even be my dad's son. I know it was said in the heat of the moment, but my dad ended up having a DNA test done. He and my mom were both shocked when it came back that my biological father was not my dad. My dad started divorce proceedings the next day at 8, I'm not sure what time it is. My stepfather. He was the only dad I ever knew. He worked all the time and we weren't all that close, but now there was no one after the divorce. I talked to him once in a while, but it wasn't the same anymore. When I asked Mom who my father was, she said she wasn't sure. She always thought it was Dad. Life was hard for me after that. I later learned that Mom was somewhat of a party woman. She married young and had my brother and sister both before. My mom was 21 when she started going out with some of the women she worked with. My dad was a truck driver, so he was away a lot. I know they both cheated on each other a lot after the divorce. My mom didn't remarry until I was 21, but she did bring a number of men to the house. They were usually there when I was away at my friend's or at my grandparents' house. They never spent the night when I was home. When I got married, I was 25. I met Megan when she was working as a secretary at the hardware store where I was employed. I asked her out and we became friends and then lovers very quickly. We were married within the year. She was always the flirtatious type, but I always thought it was just part of her personality. She seemed to be friends with everyone. She was 23 when I met her and said she was a virgin. To be honest, I never knew for sure then, but now I know the real story. Our life was what I would describe as. Our life was pretty normal. We went to the movies, visited friends and relatives, ate out about half the time. Sometimes Megan would cook meals for us at home. It was usually macaroni and cheese or something else that was easy to make, with lots of heat and served dinners. I didn't mind. We both worked, and I knew she wasn't much of a cook when we dated. When we went out with friends, I always wondered about Megan having sex with other men. I know it was because of my mother was a very private person, so I never wanted to think about her having sex with other men. I never told Megan about my mother, other than that she dated. The last thing I would have told my wife was that I was a peeping Tom and watched my mother have sex with a number of men. Our sex life was normal. We got married because she got pregnant. When she told me, I asked her to marry me. I felt it was the right thing to do. I liked her a lot. And thought I could grow to love her. From the start, her family hated me. I guess it began because they blamed me for not using protection and getting her pregnant. Megan could do no wrong. I was fighting an uphill battle from the start. The only one in her family that liked me was her sister Laura. She was 2 years younger than Megan and was a lot more quiet and kept to herself. Where Megan was outgoing, I guess I was really close to Laura because she was the only one in the family that talked to me. Megan lost the baby 3 years ago. We've been married for almost 4 years now. I've asked her if she has ever been with another man, and she always tells me she hasn't. She also told me that she doesn't need another man because I was more than enough for her. I was young and inexperienced when I graduated. My mom's new husband suggested I move out and start living on my own. I found an affordable apartment, got a job at the hardware store, and started living a pretty good life. I dated a few girls because, like most young men, I was eager to explore my sexuality. Megan went to a junior college in our town and after graduating started working as a secretary at our hardware store. As you can imagine, a young, attractive woman was always a nice sight. The woman was always a nice sight. We dated and by the third date began having sex. She was born and raised in Lakeview, Ohio, which was about 50 miles away. She would go home some weekends to see her family. When they met, they didn't care for me much. I later found out that Megan used to date a guy named Jack, whom Megan's parents were really fond of Jack. He was a football star in high school. Megan ended things with him when she went away to college. He got a job in the steel mill where his dad worked. I guess they were making pretty good money. Since Jack's dad was in management, he could be on a fast track to a promotion. I heard from Laura that Jack got angry and quickly married one of Megan's friends, Sheila. They now have 2 kids of their own. Sheila and Megan don't get along anymore, which is why Megan stayed in our town after graduating. She roomed with an aunt until we got married. I don't know her aunt all that well. They got married at the courthouse, and her parents didn't even attend. Her sister Laura did show up, as well as her aunt. Since the loss of the baby, Megan and her parents have made up. I rarely visit them, but I enjoy it when Laura comes to see us. I guess I shouldn't feel this way, but I do. Megan has made a lot of friends in our town. Some are we work with people and some of them are our neighbors. I know she has gone out with her friends, but they are all married and, as far as I know, she hasn't been unfaithful. She has told me that she has danced with other men if the girls went to a lounge, but that was all she ever did. A few times she came home. She was pretty horny and the sex was great, especially if she'd had too much to drink. I honestly believed she was faithful to me. That was until we went out of town to her cousin's wedding, which was only 50 miles away in Lakeview, the city where she grew up and graduated from high school. She introduced me to so many people that it was like a high school reunion as well as a wedding. We both drank quite a bit, as we were staying in the motel where the reception was being held. I told her I wouldn't stay at her parents' house, as they hardly even talked to me at the wedding. The trouble started when a lot of her old friends wanted to dance with her. I didn't have much of a choice when her female cousins and friends asked me to dance. I held them close but didn't get inappropriate with any of them. Megan, on the other hand, was openly flirting, which she does when she drinks. Her cousin said she was always like that, but it was harmless. I did enjoy dancing. I got on well with Laura. I made sure I didn't do anything inappropriate with her, but I did like holding her in my arms. I did tell her I didn't approve of the way Megan was acting. She didn't say anything about it, but I don't think she cared for the way Megan was acting either. I told Megan that I didn't approve of her behavior when I danced with her. She just called me an old party pooper and said she would dance with who she wanted and the way she wanted. After that, I wasn't doing much dancing, but I was drinking and watching Megan being groped over and over again. She would rub her body against a guy and then look at me and laugh. I never laughed back. There were basically 3 guys that she was dancing with inappropriately. 2 were old high school friends and the other was just a friend of theirs. I've never seen her quite this wild before. I went up to her again and told her I told her to stop or we would be leaving. She said she was having fun and if I wanted to leave, I should just go. I went over to the back wall and watched her. I was getting more and more annoyed. It was getting late and some of the guests were leaving. I figured it was finally over. At last, it was over. I thought I could get over it now. I went to the restroom and took a piss. When I came back out, Megan was gone. I looked all over for her. I even asked a couple of her cousins if they had seen her. I saw 2 of the guys that were with her earlier. One was her old. I was told that Jack had taken her up to her room. She was drunk and quite out of it. They laughed, but I didn't think it was funny. I went up to our room, but she wasn't there. I was worried that he had taken her to his room instead. I had no idea which one it might have been. Our room was on the 2nd floor. I went down to the front desk and asked which room her friends were in. I found out they were on the first floor, facing the pool, so they had 2 door entrances. I walked down the hall and saw the 2 guys I had talked to getting ready to enter the room. They must have all been rooming together. They looked back at me and I heard them laughing as they entered the room. I went down the hall and heard a woman's voice. I knew it was Megan. I knocked on the door and one of the guys opened it. I could immediately see Megan on her knees lying across the bed with her back in the air. This Jack guy had his meat buried in her. What the hell? I yelled. Megan was so into being drilled that I don't think she even heard me. This guy Tony told me that she came in willingly. I could either watch or he told me there were 3 of them and only one of me. If I caused any trouble, I'd be in trouble. Tony also had a knife. He was right. One of them against none of us would be tough. 3 against 1? I didn't stand a chance. I heard Megan ask Jack who came into the room. He told her it was Tony and Ben. They can see me naked, she said. He laughed and said they were going to do more than just see her. Ben's been interested in you for years. I told him and Tony they could have a go at you, given how you've been rubbing your body and teasing them all night. Megan didn't say anything as Ben helped Jack take off the rest of her clothes and turned her over. Tony stood next to me to make sure I didn't cause any trouble. He held a knife to my throat, but I stayed there and sat on a chair out of the way as one after the other they screwed her, begging them for more. Honestly, I don't know why I didn't at least try to put a stop to it. With or without a knife, I guess it was because Megan was asking to be drilled. After what I saw, she was not worth fighting for anymore. When Tony realized I wasn't going to put up a fight, he joined the others. I sat there like the chump I was. Tony had just finished screwing her. Damn, he said. She's one good one. I'd say he was of mixed race. Megan sat up and saw me for the first time. Oh my God, Bob, what are you doing here? She yelled. I was watching a lying wife get drilled. Don't go telling me you were being forced. I heard you asking for more. I'm sorry, Bob. I had too much to drink. Tony, Ben, please let me up. This was a big mistake. I need to go talk with my husband. She must have sobered up a little watching my wife. I couldn't stand watching other men having sex. You're not going anywhere until we're done with you, Ben said. No way, Megan replied. You have to let me go. My marriage depends on it. Your marriage is over, I told her. They looked back at me and laughed, calling me a weak cuck. I shook my head and walked out the door. They were right. I went up to my room and packed my things. I knew my marriage to Megan was over. My problem now was that I was made a cuck. I knew I had to get even with them at any cost. I couldn't let these a-holes do this to me. I knew I could take them one at a time. I just had to bide my time and do my best not to get caught. I packed my luggage and, even though I had drunk a lot, headed for home. I figured that when they got through with Megan, she would go up to our room and sleep it off. She had enough friends and relatives that lived nearby that she would find a way home at 10. Midnight. Morning. The next morning, the phone rang. It was Megan. Bob, how could you just leave me there? I can't believe any man would leave his wife like that. How am I supposed to get home? Maybe I should ask one of your boyfriends for a lift. Offer them a blowjob or some sex in return. Oh, they already got that. I'm sorry, it was a mistake. I drank too much and I didn't mean for that to happen. They took advantage of me when you left the party. They were going to walk me to my room but took me to theirs instead. First, I didn't leave the party. I went to the restroom and when I eventually found out where you were. I had to look for you for a while because I didn't realize you'd left with your ex. I'll come and get you if you decide to press charges. Otherwise, I'll have to say you were willing and that our marriage is over. I knew it was coming to an end anyway, but I wanted to see what Megan would say. I can't press charges because everyone will know what happened. Yeah, right. You were willing and now you're sorry. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. Given that it's common knowledge that you've been unfaithful, you can have the apartment. I and a couple of my friends are moving out. I hope you have a good life." I ended the call. She did get home that evening. Her sister Laura drove her home. I got a storage locker for most of my stuff and a room that rents by the week. I didn't need much. I went into the hardware store on Monday and quit my job. Megan didn't show up for work that day. I'm not sure why, but it made it a lot easier for me. I told my boss I was moving out of state and gave him a local address. I got a P.O. box to send my final checks and cashed in my savings plan. I had my pickup truck that was paid for and went to the bank and took half of the money out of our savings account. I had our checkbook and paid off the B balance of our credit card, at least the one that had my name on it. I was pretty much out of any debt that I helped incur. I left the checkbook at the bank and told them to give it to Megan when she came in for the next few days. I tried to come up with a plan after receiving my money. I had two options. I'd get $500 from my share of the savings and checking, and I'd be getting $188,000 from my job savings and another $2. I also got $500 from my last paycheck and vacation pay. I did contact a lawyer and file for a divorce. He told me I needed names and proof. If I were going to use adultery for divorce, my other option was a dissolution. But I wanted everyone to know what Megan was like. The lawyer sent Megan the papers. He also told her that I didn't want to speak to her and that she should contact him if she had any questions. I did buy a cell phone and gave my mom the. I also gave the lawyer the number of the owner of a hardware store in West Virginia, which is just across the Ohio border. I had met the owner a few times when he came to a few hardware company meetings. He told me that if I ever wanted a job, I should look him up. I never thought I would be taking him up on it. I had a meeting with him and told him that I needed a job. I explained that I was getting a divorce and that my wife worked for my old company. He promised not to tell my ex. I told him I was working for him and that I could start the following Monday. I found a trailer for sale pretty cheap. It was set up in a trailer park. I picked up my stuff out of storage and moved in. Luckily, it had a lot of furniture in it, so I didn't have to go buy a lot of things. I stopped by a diner outside of Lakeview and couldn't believe my waitress was Laura, my soon-to-be ex-sister-in-law. I was surprised to see how angry she was. "Why did you leave Megan?" "She said you were upset because she danced with her ex at the wedding and then you left her stranded with no way to get home. I took her home the next morning and you had moved out. How could you do such a thing? I never thought you were like that. Most of what you said isn't true." I don't have time to explain the whole story, but if you want to know the truth, give me a call and we can meet. I'll tell you the truth, your sister is lying and cheating. I know Laura was surprised when I called her sister a liar and cheat. I never talk that way around Laura. I gave her my phone number and asked her to keep it to herself. For some reason, she gave it to Megan. I felt I could trust Laura. I ate breakfast and headed over to my new job. The only people that knew where I was working were Laura and my lawyer. It was funny that I was only 20 miles from Megan's hometown of Lakeview. I was surprised that I did get a call from Laura the following day. She worked mornings at the diner and went to college in the afternoon. She was taking courses in nursing and she was just about finished with her studies and had about 6 months to go. She agreed to meet me for dinner at a restaurant in West Virginia after she finished her classes. She told me she wanted the truth and didn't feel she was getting it from Megan. As you might imagine, Megan had convinced everyone that it was my jealousy that broke up our marriage. My job at the hardware store was hard work but kept me physically fit. I got all the exercise I needed. Some days I went out and had a few beers with some of my colleagues. I would usually get something to eat and then go to bed to get some rest. I kept in touch with my lawyer, who told me he needed the names and addresses of the men who had sex with Megan. All I knew were their first names, Ben, Tony, and Jack. I hoped that Laura might be able to help me out when we met. For dinner, she wasn't in the best mood. She'd heard from Megan that I was trying to divorce her on the grounds of adultery, but Megan said they were unfounded. We ordered dinner and I told Laura that I'd be totally honest with her. I had no reason to lie, so I told her about the way Megan acted at the wedding. She did say she thought Megan was overdoing the flirting. Megan admitted to it, so I told her the rest of the story. I mentioned that I went to the restroom and when I came out, Megan was gone, as was her friend Jack. I let her know that I talked to Tony and Ben, and they said that Jack took Megan up to our room, but when I got there, she wasn't there. I went into detail about finding her in Jack's room with his friends, how she was having sex with them, and so on. I couldn't believe it. I just sat there and watched them having sex with Megan. I can't believe you just sat there and did nothing. I guess I just froze when I first saw her. Then she was begging them to continue. Tony had a knife and he did tell me it was 3 against 1. I would have probably fought them anyway if Megan was being assaulted. But the sex with these 3 guys. When Megan saw me, she asked them to stop. She said she made a mistake. I called her a 304 wife and said I was getting a divorce. I went back to our room, got my things and went home. I was gone when you dropped her off at home the next day. I swear to God I'm telling you the absolute truth. I would never lie to you. I care for you too much. I even mentioned to Megan that if she filed assault charges against them, I would come pick her up at the motel. She told me she couldn't do that. Laura stared at me for what seemed like the longest time. I didn't think she could see me. I asked her for a favor. Laura, I need the last names and addresses of Jack, Tony, and Ben. Would you be able to get them for me? She looked at me and then away for a few seconds. What do you want with them? I need them in my divorce statement. I'm getting divorced and I need to know the grounds for adultery. My lawyer said I should get that information. Can you get it for me? Do you know what you're asking? Megan is my sister. You want me to betray her and side with you? No, that's not true. All I'm asking for is the full names and addresses of the men who had sex with my wife. You can't. I'm not asking you to betray her. I just need the names and addresses of the men who had sex with my wife. You know me well enough to know I'm telling the truth. If you don't want to help me, I understand. But it would just be faster since I know you already know their names. I really want us to stay friends. Okay, I'll get you what you want. I have to tell you that I don't know if I totally believe you. I'll stop by on Thursday, when I'm back at work, and I'll have it for you by Thursday before work. I stopped by the restaurant and asked to be seated in Laura's section. I thought I saw her smile when she looked my way. She came to my table and gave me a folded piece of paper, which I put in my pocket. I thanked her and ordered breakfast. After work, I saw my lawyer and gave him a copy of the information I'd picked up. He told me that Megan had called him and said she wasn't going to sign the papers if it said divorce. However, if we went ahead with a dissolution on the grounds of irreconcilable differences, she would agree to that. It was about protecting her reputation. My lawyer told me that was my best option. The problem was that there was no proof to back up the allegation I was making against her in the divorce. I had no other witnesses, and the 3 men surely wouldn't admit to having sex with Megan. There was no video, no pictures, nothing to prove it happened. It was just my word against hers. I went along with the lawyer and applied for a dissolution. He said it would be finalized in about 4 months. Then I got more bad news. I was on the lease, so it would have to be renewed in 2 months. I'd have to pay half the rent for the next 2 months, then I could be removed from the rental agreement. At least I'd get rid of the lying 304. The only problem was my need for revenge. I was made a fool of. He sat there and took it. Looking back, I should have just walked out instead of watching Megan and then listening to her telling them how good it felt. I also remember Jack asking her if it was as good as it used to be. I felt sad when she said yes. Meg got away with it. The one that people believed I'm just considered a jealous husband. My lawyer and Laura are the only 2 I told the whole truth to. I figured it would all come out in the divorce, but now it was just a dissolution. I did tell my friends and the guys that I work with that my wife cheated on me, but I didn't go into details. I don't want to go into too much detail, but it was bad enough that I was a cock, let alone that I stayed and watched it happen in the following months. I worked and would stop and see Laura at the restaurant every chance I got. She gave me her work schedule and I ate there. If she was working, it was an extra 15 miles to drive, but I didn't care. I asked her out and she said she'd love to go out with me, but not until after the divorce. No one in her family knew that we were seeing each other. Even though it was only at her work, she looked sad when I came in. When I asked her what was wrong, she told me that Megan was dating Jack. It's only been 2 months since you and your wife separated, and she's already back with him. I thought Jack was married, but he is. I went to see her one day, and he was at your old apartment when she came to the door. I could see what they had been doing. She was only wearing a robe, and her hair was a mess. I saw him buttoning his shirt as he came out of the bedroom. I didn't even go in after seeing them. I called her and told her that he didn't deserve her. All she said was, "Don't tell Mom and Dad." I left knowing that everything you told me was probably true. I'm sorry for doubting you. It had now been over 4 months. It's been over 4 months since I applied for the divorce. I got a call from Laura, who said she needed to see me. We met after she got out of class one evening. I was just happy to see her. We met in a lounge outside of the city. We sat in a booth and ordered a drink. "Okay, what's up?" I asked. "You seem very nervous. I heard Megan tell her mom last night that you're the father." "That's not true. We haven't been together for over 5 months. How far along is she?" "She told her mom it was around 4 months. It must have happened around the time you left her. Is it possible it could be yours?" "I'm positive it's not, but this is going to mess up my divorce. I'm sorry, but I hate her for what she's done. All I can say is I married the wrong sister. I asked Laura if Megan hadn't gotten pregnant, I would not have married her. You see, I had a crush on you, but I wanted to do what was I married Megan, but I know she never loved me. I put in a real effort, but I have to wonder if the first baby was even mine to begin with, knowing she was sleeping around." Laura didn't say anything. I think she was a bit shocked. Then she said, "Why didn't you ever say anything to me?" "Laura, I thought it would be best to just keep it to myself. I didn't know how you felt, and it wouldn't have changed anything. It would have been uncomfortable for both of us. I wanted to make my marriage work, but it seems like your sister had other ideas. I'm sorry. I really am. I liked you too and thought of how lucky Megan was, Bob. I have to leave now, so please don't let anyone know I told you about Megan. I just thought you should know. I'm sure she'll bring it up in a couple of weeks at your dissolution hearing. I can't see you before that, except if you come into the restaurant she owns." She gave me a hug and said she was leaving. I saw tears in her eyes. She gave me a piece of paper with her work schedule for the next month. Maybe she wanted to see me after all. I knew it must be hard on her, knowing how Megan was lying to her parents or that she hadn't told anyone that she and I had been, and I did stop by for breakfast whenever I knew she was there. We only had a few minutes to talk, but it was always nice seeing her. I did get a call from my lawyer about our appearance in court. He mentioned that my wife said she was pregnant and was asking for support. She was at the closing of the I told them we'd already agreed to the settlement and that I wasn't paying anything more. I also told her attorney that the baby wasn't mine and I wasn't giving her anything. Megan had health coverage from her job, so it would cover most of the cost of the baby. I told her attorney that I wasn't the baby's father, but I would sign an addendum to the dissolution form that said I would pay half of any medical bills that would occur as well as child support until the child was 18. I would also pay for a DNA test at the baby's birth. If the child wasn't mine, she wouldn't get anything from me. She was angry, but her attorney said it was a fair offer and she should take it. We signed the addendum, and then my marriage was over. After signing the final papers, I looked over at Megan with disdain and said, "By the way, I know you're still sleeping with. You might want to tell your old boyfriend Jack that he's going to be a daddy." She looked at me with one of those looks that said, "How do you know that?" I just walked out a free man, but deep down I knew that really wasn't much. Revenge is still needed, and now it was time to make a few plans. I thought that through. Maybe I should just let it all go and move on with my life, but I just couldn't. I felt like I had to do something. The next time I saw Laura, I told her that I'd told Megan that I knew she was sleeping with Jack and she might want to tell him he's going to be a father. I didn't tell her I told you, did I? No, I just blurted it out. No one except the guys at work knows I even come here to see you. I'm divorced now, so can we get together? Bob, this is a very busy time for me. I'm working, plus I have my school and finals coming up. I'm graduating with a nursing degree in a few months. Then there's the big problem of dealing with my family. They still blame you for the divorce and getting Megan pregnant again. Maybe if I talked with them, they might understand differently someday, but this isn't the best time. I'm not avoiding you. In fact, I want to be with you, but the time has to be right. Right, please try to understand. Due to her work schedule and schooling, I could only see her twice a week for breakfast. I told her I could wait as long as she needed me to. I was able to get a little information on the guys that had sex with Megan. I decided to start getting even. I knew that the three guys didn't always hang out together. Sometimes they went to a bar across from the steel mill after work. I got their home addresses from Laura. She had no idea I was going to use it for revenge. I started my revenge with Tony, the guy that had sex with Megan and held a knife on me while I sat there and watched my wife have sex and him laughing at me. I followed him a couple of times to a bar near where he lived. I always kept my distance and never went in. It was a mixed bar, but mostly Hispanic. Tony would often go there on Saturday nights and sometimes during the week, staying for an hour or so. He'd ride his motorcycle and park it in the back so no one would mess with it. It was late on a Wednesday night when I followed him to the bar. It was a pretty quiet night for bars since it was a weeknight. It was a dreary, dark night, and not much was happening. I waited an hour and was parked in a lot next to the bar. It was near midnight when he came out. I looked all around but didn't see anyone. I put a mask over my face, like a cold weather mask. I took my ball bat and went up behind him. He didn't hear me because he was starting his cycle. I swung the bat and hit him across the small of the back. I swung 2 more times, hitting his arms, which he raised to protect his head. He did have his helmet on, but I still got his bell rung. I swung 1 last time and hit him in the ribs. He never had a chance to retaliate or see who I was. He fell off his bike, which had stopped running, and fell to the pavement in pain. He seemed to be conscious but barely. I went back to my truck and went home. I guess I was lucky that no one had seen me. It was a stupid thing to do, but sometimes we all do things we shouldn't. The next day, the papers said a man had been beaten behind the bar. They had no witnesses or suspects. There was no one who would think I was involved. It was nearly 6 months ago that he drilled my ex. My wife, and it was never mentioned in court. Maybe this dissolution turned out better for me. I would have liked for Tony to have known it was me, but that would have caused a whole new set of problems further down the line. The next time I had stopped in for breakfast, Laura asked me if I read about Tony getting beat up. I told her I had, but I didn't know much. I'm pleased he got his own back. Perhaps it was another husband getting even with him. Laura stared at me but never asked if I was involved. I wouldn't have wanted to lie to her. I did get some satisfaction from beating him. It's a shame he didn't know it was me, but that could cause problems in the long term. He ended up in the hospital for a week with multiple bruises and fractures. He was out of work for a month, according to the reports. He had no idea who it was because the person was wearing a mask. He didn't even know his attacker. I wore gloves, which was probably a good thing. It was now time to go after Jack. He was married, so I figured the revenge might be a little easier to attain. I knew that on Saturdays he usually went to Megan. Thanks to the information I got from Laura, I figured he told her. He told his wife he was working or out with his friends, so he had the whole day to be with Megan. Around noon on Saturday, I went to his house. I knew his wife was named Sheila and was in the same graduating class as Jack and Megan. I knocked on the door and a nice-looking lady answered. I could see 2 small children yelling and playing in the living room. "Can I help you?" asked Sheila. "My name is Bob Harris." I'm not quite sure how to say this to you. Your husband is having sex with my ex. I'm Bob Harris. My wife is Megan Harris. She was in your high school. I know who she is. How do you know Jack is screwing her? She came out on the porch and closed the door so her kids couldn't hear. We were at a wedding a few months ago and I caught them having sex. I didn't know if it was a one-time thing at the time, but after hearing I found out that she was with him before I divorced her. Now I hear she was with him before we were married and that she's still having sex with him. She's pregnant and I think Jack is the father. I know I'm not the one who's pregnant. Why should I believe you? I don't even know you. You come to my house while my husband is at work and accuse him of sleeping with his old girlfriend. It sounds like you just want revenge. I do want revenge, but is it the truth? Your husband isn't at work today. He's with Megan at her apartment, which is 50 miles away. He goes there most every week. I can prove it to you. How are you going to do that? I'll call Megan and ask to speak to Jack. Then he'll hand you the phone. Do you know of any reason why he should be there? No, of course not. Wait here while I get the phone. She went inside and brought her phone out. I noticed it was a speaker phone and told her I would use it so she could. I called my old number and Megan answered. Megan, this is Bob. What do you want? I know your lover, Jack, is there and I need to say something to him. Put him on. He's not here. You're lying. Wife again. He started laughing. Sheila yelled, You creep. So you're back sleeping with your 304s again? Well, I have news for you. You can just stay there. We're through. I'm going to drill Bob. You can play this game too, Jack. Jack mumbled a bunch of things that didn't make sense. He was trying to make excuses, but Sheila told him to go to hell. She said he was a lying, cheating creep and that she was getting a divorce. After she hung up, she told me she had no intention of having sex with me. She just said it to get even with Jack. She was a mother and had 2 children. She said that with her job and the alimony she'd get from Jack, she'd be doing pretty well. She thanked me for telling her the truth. She said that if Jack ever asked me if I'd slept with her, I could say yes. But in court for the divorce, she'd be telling the truth. I did tell her that. She asked me to be a witness in her divorce case, and I said I'd be willing to testify. I left feeling both good and bad. I got revenge on Jack, but I hurt Sheila and broke up her marriage. She did tell me she thought he'd been cheating on her, but she never had any proof. I couldn't help but wonder why Jack would have a fling with Megan, a nice-looking woman with 2 kids at home who cared for him. Some guys are just born with a hole in their soul. Even though some were school athletes, they still think they're studs. Guys like Jack needed to grow up. Sheila did kick his butt. Jack couldn't stay with Megan because it was too far from his work. When Laura found out, she wasn't mad at me. In fact, she said her sister deserved it. Jack's parents were surprised that he'd cheated on his wife with Megan. Jack moved in with Ben and his mother on a temporary basis. Ben was divorced a couple of years ago. His wife left him for another man, and he moved back in with his mother. I found out that his mom was divorced when Ben was a teenager. She pretty much raised him alone. A lot of us were raised by a single parent. She was a bartender at a local bar. However, she had asked Ben not to be a customer there because it made her feel uncomfortable watching him drink the way his father did. She didn't have a problem with Jack moving in temporarily until he could find a place of his own. I got most of my information from small talks with Laura told me that Megan was expecting and would be having her baby in another month or so. She said that Jack wasn't the kind of guy that could take care of himself and that he needed a woman to take care of him. She also told me that Megan came to visit her parents one weekend and brought Jack along. According to Laura, Jack used his charm to explain that he and Sheila had been on the outs for quite some time. He saw Megan at the wedding and remembered how much he cared for her. He started seeing her after I filed for divorce. They became close again and now he's asked her to marry him. They're close friends again and now he's asked her to marry him. He knows she's going through a lot, so they're waiting until after the baby is born and his divorce is final. They're planning to find a place near Lakeview so that Megan and the baby will be near her parents. He got a promotion at the mill, so Megan wouldn't have to work if she didn't want to. He did say he would be a good father to the baby, even though it was mine. Megan's parents accepted him, lock, stock and barrel. Laura said she couldn't believe all the crap the two of them put out. She did her best not to. She was always their favorite and could do no wrong. Laura and Megan were pretty much opposites. I wanted to be with Laura, but she was so busy working at the diner, was taking her nursing classes and also helping out at the hospital as a nurse's aide. Maybe her time would come. She always told me that I went into the bar with 4 of my friends after work. I couldn't believe it when I saw Jack and Ben sitting there. I didn't know whether to avoid them or I had to confront them. When Jack said, "Hey Bob, I'm screwing your old lady again," I didn't have much choice. He screwed up my marriage, but I still have your ex to deal with. They started laughing. "So you're screwing a pregnant 304 who was willing to give out to your friends? Aren't you the lucky one? You say we should step outside and settle this little shouting match, or are you afraid of going one-on-one? There are only 2 of us and 4 of you. Even L matched." He laughed the minute I beat you up. "They'll all jump in on your side, just like they did at the wedding. She asked for it, and you know it. Stay the hell away from Sheila. And my kids. If you know what's good for you, I don't need a ready-made family. I'll let you support them. I have to say that Sheila is one nice woman. She's not like the 304 I was married to. It seems like you've hooked your horse up to the wrong wagon." My friends and I went over and got a booth and had a few beers. I could see Jack and Ben talking and would like to jump in. I was with 3 other guys, so I was happy to take on either one, as long as it was one-on-one. I got us some more beers on the way back and heard Ben call me a cuck. I looked at him and said, "You're next on my list." They probably wondered if it was me that beat up Tony months ago, but there was no proof. Ben did say, "Hey man, I don't have a wife or sisters to mess up, so I guess I'll just screw my old lady." He laughed. I went back to my table, but I have to admit that Ben's idea had some merit. My buddies and I left the bar without incident. They told me that they would have my back if I ever needed them. The following Saturday night, I went by myself to a bar. I'd never been there before. It was a small neighborhood bar with about a dozen customers. Everyone looked at me, probably because they knew everyone who ever came into the place. I sat at the end of the bar and ordered a beer. The bartender was Ben's mother. She was probably in her late 40s and was beginning to show her age. She had a few visible tattoos. After I'd sat down with my beer, she asked if I wanted anything else. It was after midnight, but I asked if I could get something to eat. The cook had gone, but I could rustle up a ham sandwich if I could get the ingredients. I told her that would be great, as I hadn't eaten all day. She served the other customers and went back to make my sandwich. It had ham, mayo and lettuce, tomato and cheese. Lettuce, tomato and cheese. I got a bag of chips to eat with it within the hour. Most of the customers had left. There were 2 couples still sitting in the booth. Helen was cleaning off the bar and came over to talk to me. "You new here? Where are you from?" "I recently got divorced and moved to West Virginia. I work in the hardware store. I was riding through town. I saw this place and decided to get a beer and a bite to eat. I'm Helen. I've been here for 15 years. We don't get many young guys here. They usually want to pick up some young chick. We don't get many of those." I smiled. I could use that too. It's been a while since the divorce. I smiled at Helen. She wasn't a bad. She was wearing a low-cut blouse that showed some nice cleavage. She wasn't overweight, in fact she was on the thinner side. I began joking with her and she was flirting back. We talked for a while and she told me her son moved back in with her and now has his own place. She said her friend was living with him for a few months. She also said he was getting a divorce. She smiled and said, "Must be something in the water." I replied, Damn, honey. Sorry to hear that. I walked out and never returned. We continued talking. Helen was nice and personable. I decided to go for it. Helen, what are you doing after work? What are you really interested in? I asked her, are you an old lady? Helen asked with a smirk, what are you doing after work? I could use some company, I replied confidently. Helen laughed and said, well, why not? It's been a while since I had a decent man's company. She closed up the bar and we headed to her place. It was a small house not far from the bar. As we walked in, she said her son Ben wasn't home, so we had the place to ourselves. I knew this might complicate things, but I didn't care. We had a few more drinks and chatted. Helen was really easy to get along with. Before we knew it, we were in her bedroom. I made sure not to get too carried away, but we had a great time. I wanted Ben to find out, but I had to make sure it wouldn't backfire on me in the morning. I thanked Helen for a wonderful night and left. I made sure to leave a note for Ben in a place he'd find it. I thanked Helen Bob for a great night. I made sure to leave a note for Ben, but I didn't tell him everything. In the next few weeks, I kept my distance from Ben's place, but I heard through Laura that Ben was furious. He didn't know for sure who Bob was, but he had his suspicions. I also heard that Jack had been trying to get back with Sheila, but she wasn't having it. She had filed for divorce and was moving on with her life. Good for her. Megan eventually had her baby. Laura told me it was a boy. Megan tried to get me to acknowledge the child as mine, but I insisted on a DNA test. The test proved what I already knew, the baby wasn't mine. Jack was the father. Megan was devastated, and Jack, being the stand-up guy he is, bailed her out. He couldn't handle the responsibility of a child. Typical. My life was slowly getting back to normal. Laura and I started dating seriously after. After she graduated, she moved to West Virginia to be closer to me and started working at the local hospital. Our relationship grew stronger, and I found myself falling for her one evening after a nice dinner. I asked Laura to marry me, and she was surprised but said yes. We got married in a small ceremony with just close friends. Her parents didn't attend, but I didn't care. We were happy, and that was all that mattered. As for Ben and Jack, they got what was coming to them. Ben got into a bar fight and ended up in the hospital. He never knew who did it, but I had my suspicions. Jack's life went downhill. He lost his job and was last seen working odd jobs just to get by. Megan, on the other hand, moved back in with her parents. Her life was a mess, but that was her own doing. Laura and I built a good life together. We had 2 beautiful children. I finally found peace and happiness with the right woman. My past was behind me and I had my revenge. Life was good. Thanks for watching. What do you think about Bob's intense journey from betrayal to revenge and finally finding true happiness with Laura? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more dramatic stories. See you in the next video.